They bulldozed my lake cabin on live stream, 40,000 people cheering because I wouldn't pay $800 in fake HOA fees. But what nobody knew was that I had damn good reasons. And when 3 black government SUVs rolled up mid-broadcast, the HOA president's smug grin vanished on camera. Her audience flooded the chat with panic. She thought I was just some retiree. She was dead wrong. Stay with Meath goes from HOA drama to federal takedown in minutes. Picture this: I'm on my porch at sunrise, sipping coffee, watching the lake glow gold. Then I hear the deep rumble of a bulldozer crawling up my driveway. Behind it, a ridiculous hot pink SUV, rhinestones across the windshield, spelling HOA President. Out steps Kathy Morrison, 55 years old, sparkling head to toe like she'd raided a craft store. Nails clicking, phone out, live stream rolling. 40,000 people watching. Good morning, community warriors. She shouts into her ring light. Yes, she brought a ring light to demolish my cabin. Another deadbeat boomer about to learn what accountability looks like. The comments fly in. Destroy it. Make him pay. She zooms in on me, bathrobe, coffee cup, confused old man. This retiree refused to pay $800 in HOA fees for months, plus late penalties. Her audience roars approval. But here's the truth. There was no legitimate HOA, no filings, no elections, just Kathy's fake empire, bleeding elderly neighbors with invented fees. $800 was nothing but extortion, and I knew it because I'm not just some retiree. I'm Liam Harper, 68, 30 years FBI. Wire fraud cases were my bread and butter, so I sat there, letting her dig her own grave, every word recorded on my phone. Every threat, every comment, live evidence of elder abuse and conspiracy. The bulldozer operator, barely out of college, shifted uncomfortably as Kathy barked orders. Flatten the garden to community standards, include landscaping. That garden wasn't just plants. It was roses my late wife Emily planted before her accident. Watching them about to be crushed lit something inside me. That's when Kathy froze mid-rant. She zoomed in closer. Her glittery smile cracked. Wait, she whispered. I know that face. The livestream chat went silent. Then she said it. Agent Harper. No, you're supposed to be broken. Gone. And there it was, the slip. This wasn't random. This was revenge. 10 years earlier, I'd led the federal case that sent Kathy to prison for wire fraud, scamming seniors out of their savings, and she'd spent every day since plotting her payback. What her 40,000 viewers thought was community justice was actually a felon live streaming her confession. That's when my phone buzzed. 3 identical texts from my kids. Dad rolling now. Federal response authorized. You see, while most dads teach their kids to throw a ball, mine grew up learning constitutional law and evidence collection. And every one of them followed me into federal service, FBI, Homeland Security, and Postal Inspection. So when 3 black SUVs pulled up in perfect formation, Kathy's nephew, Derek, dropped his Big Mac mid-bite. Kathy, why do those government plates all have different federal seals? The livestream chat exploded. Are those feds? This isn't HOA drama. Out stepped my daughter Sophia, sharp charcoal suit, sunglasses worth more than that bulldozer.com/controlled, hugged me. Dad, saw the livestream, you okay? Chat went ballistic. Kathy, blinded by ego, couldn't resist the camera. Instead of cutting the feed, she doubled down. Oh, look, Daddy's little government pencil pusher, here to protect him. But Sophia didn't blink. Ma'am, This is property destruction without legal authority. That's a federal crime. Her tone so precise, it made even Derek pause. Mid-chew. Then Ethan emerged buzzcot, tactical awareness in every step. Number. Words wasted, just scanning the property, hand signaling his sister like a soldier. The chat caught it immediately. That's federal training. And finally, Lucas stepped out, postal inspector uniform, evidence kit in hand. Methodical, professional, dad, mail fraud, evidence secured. Multiple jurisdictions. This is significant. Kathy's 40,000 fans were no longer cheering. They were watching a meltdown. Her rhinestones sparkled as she screamed. 10 years ago, Harper destroyed me. Prison ruined my life. Now I'm destroying his retirement in front of the world. The comments turned. Wait, she just confessed. She's done. This is a federal case. Her audience thought they were watching a petty HOA drama. What they actually saw was a criminal incriminate herself. Fliv. 2 tens of thousands while 3 federal agencies rolled in. And trust me, that was just the beginning. I'm talking more people than most Super Bowl halftime shows. And every single person in that chat was trying to figure out what they were actually witnessing. Comments were flying by so fast they looked like digital. Rain, people screaming, call the police, and Karen's about to get arrested. But Kathy, she was so drunk on social media, power and revenge fantasies that she couldn't see the federal freight train about to flatten her. Instead of doing what any rational person would do when the FBI shows up, which is shut up and call a lawyer, she decided to put on the performance of her lifetime for her audience. You see this, community warriors? Cha screamed at her phone, waving it around like some kind of rhinestone-covered weapon. The corrupt federal family that destroyed my life 10 years ago. They think they can intimidate me with their badges and their government cars, but I have truth on my side. I have 100,000 witnesses. The woman literally turned a simple property dispute into a federal case study, and she was live streaming every single minute of her own destruction. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She thought she was creating viral content when she was actually creating evidence for federal prosecutors. Derek Morrison, God bless his terrified soul, finally reached his breaking point. The man had stress-eaten his way through what looked like an entire McDonald's menu. Over the past hour, his wife Anna was absolutely destroying his phone with panicked messages. And now he was standing in the middle of what every news outlet in America was calling the biggest HOA fraud bust in federal history. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely hold his camera equipment. Kathy, he said, his voice cracking like a 13-year-old boy. I really think we need to call a lawyer right now. Anna's been watching the news feeds and they're saying this could be a federal conspiracy case. But Kathy was way too far gone to listen to reason. Derek, she snapped, turning that manic energy on her poor nephew. This harassment by federal agents is going to make us millions in lawsuit money. Keep filming. The woman honestly believed she was going to sue the federal government for showing up to her live stream crime spree. It was like watching someone threaten to sue gravity for making them fall. Derek looked at his aunt, then at the 3 government vehicles, then at his phone buzzing with what was probably Anna threatening to divorce him if he didn't come home immediately. You could literally see the moment his survival instinct finally overpowered his family loyalty. That's when my 3 children decided to stop playing games and show Kathy Morrison exactly what kind of family she'd chosen to mess with. Sophia stepped forward first, removing those designer sunglasses and pulling out her FBI credentials like she was revealing a royal flush in the world's highest stakes poker game. Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Division, she announced clearly. For the live stream, her voice carrying that unmistakable authority that makes criminals everywhere start sweating. Ma'am, you're currently broadcasting what appears to be elder abuse, harassment, and interstate fraud to over 100,000 witnesses. The live stream chat absolutely lost its mind. I'm talking about complete digital chaos. Halefamily, FBI. Karen is so screwed. This is insane. People were sharing the stream faster than wildfire. And Kathy's view count was climbing toward 200,000 assword, spread across every social media platform on Earth. But the most beautiful part, Kathy's reaction instead of the terror any normal person would feel when surrounded by federal agents, she got angry. Magnificently, dramatically, spectacularly angry. Ethan moved next to his Department of Homeland Security badge, catching the morning sun like a promise of justice. Department of Homeland Security, Criminal Investigation Division, he stated with that military precision that made drill sergeants weep with pride. We have credible evidence of money laundering operations and systematic targeting of elderly victims across multiple counties. This investigation has been ongoing for 18 months. The way he delivered that information was like watching a surgeon make the perfect incision. Precise, professional, and absolutely devastating to the patient. Then Lucas stepped up with his postal inspection specials. And let me tell you something about postal inspectors. They don't mess around when it comes to mail fraud. United States Postal Inspection Service, he announced with that quiet confidence that comes from having a 98% conviction rate. Ma'am, using the U.S. mail system to defraud elderly citizens is a federal felony with a maximum sentence of 20 years per count. We've documented systematic mail fraud across 12 states involving your operation. The beautiful thing about this moment, folks, was watching Kathy's brain try to process what was happening. 3 federal badges, 3 different agencies. 3 of my children are ending her like the world's most qualified intervention team. Her rhinestone phone case was actuality blinging in her hands as the magnitude of her situation started to penetrate that narcissistic bubble she'd been living in. But instead of surrendering, instead of asking for a lawyer, instead of doing anything that might help her legal situation, Kathy Morrison doubled down one more time. The Harper Federal Dynasty. She screamed at her livestream audience, spittle flying her carefully applied makeup, starting to run in feminine heat. They destroyed my life 10 years ago when I was just trying to make an honest living. Now they think they can destroy me again with their badges and their government corruption. But I have 200,000 witnesses. It was like watching someone choose to jump off a cliff because they were mad at gravity. Pure, beautiful, self-destructive autism in its most natural habitat. Derek had completely abandoned any pretense of filming. At this point, Thepagai was just standing there staring at the 3 federal badges, probably calculating how many years in federal prison his cooperation with Kathy's schemes was going to cost him. His phone was ringing non-stop. Anna calling from their house where she was probably watching this disaster unfold on every news channel in America. Kathy, he whispered, and his voice sounded like a man who'd just seen his entire future collapse. I think we're in serious federal trouble here. But then something happened that made this whole situation go from a federal case to an absolute miracle. Kathy's phone started ringing. Not buzzing with a text, not chimming with a notification, but actually ringing with an old-fashioned phone. Call. She looked at the caller ID and Iswir. Her face went through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, hope, terror, and finally, complete disbelief. The livestream audience could see her screen, and when that caller ID flashed across 200,000 people's devices simultaneously, the chat went completely silent for about 2 heartbeats before exploding like a digital nuclear bomb. "This is Kathy whispered, then louder for her audience. "This is impossible." And the caller ID read Emily Harper, my supposedly dead wife, who'd been buried 2 years ago after that terrible car accident. Kathy answered the call and put it on speakerphone because of course she did. After all, she'd built her entire identity around sharing every moment of her life with her online audience, even when those moments were about to destroy her completely. Emily Harper Foundation came from a woman's voice through the phone clear as a church bell on a quiet Sunday morning. "Kathy Morrison, I've been waiting for your call." The live stream chat went completely insane. "Dead wife is alive. What the hell is happening? This can't be real." Derek literally dropped his phone and started backing toward his car, his face white as Freshno. Even my 3 children exchanged glances that mixed professional satisfaction with personal amazement. Artho, perfectly this operation was unfolding. All 3 Harper children stand together, each holding different federal badges. Kathy's live stream reaches 100,000 viewers as she screams, "The whole family, the whole Harper family, are federal agents." Derek's phone rings. It's Anna crying. "Derek, you need to see the news. They're calling it the biggest HOA fraud bust in history." But then Kathy's phone buzzes with an incoming call. The caller ID shows Emily Harper. How is a dead woman calling? Folks, I've witnessed a lot of incredible things in 30 years of federal law enforcement. But watching my supposedly dead wife coordinate a federal investigation from witness protection, while my revenge-obsessed nemesis live streams her own destruction to 200,000 people. That's a new one, even for someone who's seen every kind of crazy the criminal world has to offer. The federal SUV pulled up to my driveway and outstepped Emily Harper, my beautiful, brilliant wife, who was supposed to be 6 feet under in Riverside Cemetery. She was wearing official Department of Justice credentials, carrying a briefcase that probably contained enough evidence to put Kathy away for multiple lifetimes, and had that same determined expression I fell in love with when she was prosecuting white-collar criminals 35 years ago. The livestream audience absolutely lost their collective minds when Emily appeared on camera. I'm talking complete digital chaos. The chat was scrolling so fast, it looked like some kind of matrix code. People typing impossible and zombies are real and call the Ghostbusters. But the most entertaining reaction was watching Kathy Morrison's brain try to process what her eyes were seeing. She stumbled backwards so hard she nearly dropped her precious rhinestone phone case. Her mouth opening and closing like a fish that had been yanked out of water. "This is impossible," she kept repeating, like saying it in all times would make reality bend to her will. "I attended your funeral, Emily Harper." Kathy finally managed to scream at the camera. "I watched them lower your casket into the ground. I even sent flowers, white roses, because I wanted everyone to think I was being respectful." That's when Emily smiled that same prosecutor's smile that had convinced juries to convict hundreds of criminals over the years. "Did you send flowers, Kathy?" she asked with that calm matter-of-fact tone that made guilty people everywhere start confessing their sins. "Or did you cause me funeral to make sure your primary target was properly isolated and vulnerable for your revenge plot?" Here's what the 200,000 live stream viewers didn't know, what Kathy couldn't have figured out in her wildest nightmares, and what made this moment absolutely perfect from a justice standpoint. 2 years ago, Emily had been working as a federal analyst investigating a pattern of elder abuse cases that stretched across multiple states. Her investigation had led her to a network of fake homeowners associations, fraudulent community organizations, and systematic targeting of elderly victims, with Kathy Morrison's operations sitting right at the poisonous center of the whole conspiracy. But when Emily got too close to the truth, when she started connecting Kathy's personal revenge, Plateau, a much larger criminal enterprise, she became a target herself. The car accident that supposedly killed my wife, that was federal witness protection, staging her death so she could continue the investigation from a secure location while keeping our entire family safe from retaliation. For 18 months, Emily had been living in a federal safe house, coordinating with investigators across 12 states, building an airtight case against systematic elder abuse, while I grieved for a wife who was actually working round the clock to protect vulnerable seniors from Redditors like Kathy Morrison. The personal cost of that sacrifice was something we were still processing. But watching Emily systematically dismantle Kathy's criminal enterprise in front of 250,000 witnesses, that made every lonely night worth it. 18 months, Kathy. Emily continued opening her briefcase and pulling out file after file of meticulously organized documentation. 18 months of watching you build your revenge, fantasy document your crimes in excruciating detail, and systematically destroy evidence of your own criminal enterprise. Do you have any idea how rare it is for federal investigators to have a subject voluntarily document their own federal crimes with such precision? Derek Morrison was frantically trying to get cell phone service so he could call Anna, his hands shaking so badly he kept dropping his phone into the puddle of McDonald's sauce he'd created during his nervous breakdown. But Emily wasn't finished with her presentation to Kathy's livestream audience. She was turning this into a masterclass in federal criminal investigation. She pulled out photograph after photograph showing the scope of Kathy's operation with the kind of detail that makes prosecutors weep with joy. 47 elderly victims across 3 counties. Kathy, systematic targeting of recent widows and widowers, fraudulent HOA fees ranging from $500 to $3,000 per victim, and a money-laundering operation that funneled proceeds through multiple fake business entities. The livestream comments were incredible. People were getting a real-time education in elder abuse while watching a master criminal get systematically destroyed by her own evidence. That's when Derek Morrison finally reached his absolute breaking point. The stress, the McDonald's of the realization that he'd been filming federal crimes for over a year while his wife begged him to stop. It all hit him like a freight train loaded with regret. "I want federal immunity," he shouted, throwing his hands up in complete surrender. "Full cooperation. I'll testify against Kathy. I'll provide all financial records. I'll give you everything you need. Just please, don't send me to federal prison for the rest of my life." His voice cracked on that last part, and you could see 18 months of guilt and terror finally pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. Anna Morrison had finally fought her way through the crowd of news crews and federal agents to get close enough to hear what was happening, and she was standing at the edge of my property, sobbing with pure relief. "That's my Derek," she called out, her voice carrying over the chaos. "He's been wanting to tell the truth for months, but he was terrified of what Kathy would do to our family." It was like watching Ammon, who had been drowning, finally break the surface and gulp down that first breath of air. The weight that lifted off Derek's shoulders was visible from space. Emily looked at Derek with the kind of professional compassion that made her such an effective federal analyst. "Derek, Your cooperation over the past 6 months has been noted and thoroughly appreciated, she said. And I could see Derek's knees literally buckle with relief. The recording equipment you thought you were using to document harassment against elderly victims that was actually providing us with evidence of systematic criminal enterprise. Your wife Anna's community organizing efforts, she's been helping victims connect with federal victim services without even realizing it. You've been helping us build this case for months without knowing it. Now, here's where Kathy Morrison made her final, absolutely fatal mistake. Instead of asking for a lawyer, instead of invoking her right to remain silent, instead of doing literally anything that might improve her hopeless legal situation, she decided to double down one more time for her audience. Federal conspiracy, she screamed at her phone's spittle-flying rhinestones, catching the light like a deranged disco ball. They faked a death. They staged a funeral. They manipulated evidence and violated my constitutional rights. 200,000 witnesses to federal corruption and elder abuse by government agents. Emily just smiled and pulled out one final document from her briefcase. A piece of paper that was about to end Kathy Morrison's criminal career permanently. Kathy, this is a federal wiretap authorization signed 18 months ago by federal judge Patricia Williams of the Eastern District. Every phone call you've made, every text message you've sent, every email you've written, and every live stream you've broadcast have been legally monitored and recorded as part of an ongoing federal investigation into elder abuse and organized fraud conspiracy. The live A-stream chat went completely silent for about 3 seconds, then exploded with comments that would have made a sailor blush. Emily steps out of a federal vehicle wearing official credentials, very much alive. The live stream audience loses their minds. She's alive. The dead wife is alive. Kathy stumbles backward. This is impossible. I attended your funeral. Emily smiles coldly. Did you really think we'd let you operate freely after what you did? Derek whispers into his phone. Anna, you're not going to believe this, but Emily's next words. Chilaveryon, Kathy, did you? What happened next, folks, was like watching the most perfectly choreographed federal operation unfold in real time. And let me tell you, it was more entertaining than any action movie Hollywood ever produced. Emily pulled out her secure federal phone and made a series of calls that would turn Kathy Morrison's stable day into an absolutely catastrophic nightmare. This is Federal Analyst Harper Authorization Code 77 Alpha Delta, she said with that crisp, professional tone that makes federal criminals everywhere start updating their wills. Execute coordinated operations across all 12 target states. Subjects are confirmed, evidence is secured, and live stream documentation is complete for prosecution. Within 20 minutes, my quiet little lake community looked like the headquarters for every federal agency in America. New helicopters were circling overhead like mechanical vultures. Federal vehicles were arriving from 3 different, and Kathy's livestream audience had exploded to over 300,000 people, watching what every news outlet was calling the largest coordinated elder abuse bust in federal history. The woman who had wanted to be internet famous was finally getting her wish. Just not in the way she'd imagined when she started live streaming my cabin's demolition that morning. The scope of Kathy's criminal operation was absolutely staggering. And Emily had 18 months of documentation to prove every single horrifying detail. 47 fake homeowners associations across 12 states. Kathy, Emily, announced to the live stream audience like she was giving a university lecture on federal crimes. Systematic targeting of elderly widows and widowers. fraudulent billing schemes ranging from $500 to $5,000 per victim, and a money-laundering network that processed over $2 million in stolen funds from vulnerable senior citizens. Each revelation hit Kathy like a physical punch, and you could actually see her confidence crumbling in real time as the true magnitude of her criminal empire was laid out for the world to see. Derek Morrison was providing additional details to federal agents, while his wife, Anna, held his trembling hands, and his cooperation was filling in gaps that would have taken investigators months to piece together through traditional methods. She made me photograph every victim's reaction when they couldn't pay. Dirk confessed, his voice shaking with 18 months of suppressed guilt. Kathy said their fear and desperation would make good contingent for her social media followers. But now, I realized she was documenting psychological abuse for her own sick entertainment. Anna Morrison was crying as her husband finally purged himself of the secrets that had been eating him alive. Anna Morrison had become something of a community hero during this whole nightmare, and watching her transformation was genuinely inspiring. While Derek was stress-eating McDonald's and filming crimes, Anna had been quietly documenting victim testimonies, connecting elderly targets with legitimate social services, and building the grassroots support network that helped people heal from Kathy's systematic abuse. I knew something was fundamentally wrong, Anna told the federal investigators. Derek would come home from these so-called enforcement visits looking physically ill. The man who normally devours 3 helpings of dinner would barely touch his food. When Simone, who loves eating, suddenly can't eat, you know their soul is being poisoned. The federal coordination happening around us was absolutely beautiful to witness from a professional standpoint. Sophia was working with banking investigators to trace the money-laundering trail through multiple fake business entities across state. Ethan was coordinating with local law enforcement in 12 different states to execute simultaneous arrests on evidence seizures. Lucas was building mail fraud cases that would ensure Kathy and her accomplices faced maximum federal penalties under every applicable statute, and Emily was conducting the whole operation like a master musician leading a symphony orchestra. 18 months of patient investigation, finally crescendoing into spectacular justice. Kathy's social media empire was collapsing faster than a house of cards in a hurricane, and watching it happen was more satisfying than Christmas morning. Her follower count was dropping by the thousands every minute as people realized they'd been supporting a criminal enterprise that targeted their own grandparents. The comments section had turned completely against her. We were scammed, too. She stole money from my elderly neighbor. Federal prison isn't punishment enough for this monster. The woman who'd built her entire identity around online influence. Watching that influence evaporate as the truth spread across every platform on the internet. Derek's complete cooperation was the final nail in Kathy's coffin, and his testimony provided federal prosecutors with evidence that would have been impossible to obtain any other way. She required me to film every single interaction, direct the agent's his voice getting stronger as the truth poured out of him. Every payment demand, every threat against elderly victims, every moment of psychological intimidation. Kathy claimed we were creating documentation of community accountability, but what we were really creating was evidence of systematic elder abuse and federal conspiracy. The relief on both Dirk's and Anna's faces was visible from orbit as months of guilt and terror finally lifted from their shoulders. The community transformation happening around us was remarkable to witness in real time. Elderly victims who'd been isolated and terrorized for months were finally receiving justice and professional support. Federal victim services were connecting. people with counseling programs and financially recovery assistance. Anna Morrison's grassroots organizing was evolving into official victim advocacy work that would help heal the psychological wounds Kathy had inflicted. This is what genuine community accountability looks like. Emily explained to the livestream audience: transparent democratic processes, constitutional protections for all residents, and zero tolerance for predators who target vulnerable populations. Federal agents were simultaneously executing raids across 12 states with the kind of precision that makes other law enforcement agents sweep with envy. Kathy's accomplices were being arrested at exactly the same moment. Evidence was being seized from dozens of locations, and the money-enduring network was being systematically dismantled piece by piece. Federal prosecutors were building cases that would ensure everyone involved in the elder abuse conspiracy faced serious prison time and complete financial forfeit. This coordinated investigation represents the largest federal effort against systematic elder abuse in American history. The lead federal prosecutor announced to the growing media crowd. That's when Kathy made her final, absolutely desperate play for some kind of deal that might save her from spending the rest of her life in federal prison. "I want to cooperate," she screamed at the federal agents, finally grasping the true scope of her legal troubles. "I have information about bigger operations, international money-laundering connections, and political corruption that goes all the way to Washington. I know things that could bring down entire criminal networks." But Emily just shook her head with that same sad professional smile I'd seen her use on countless criminals who thought they were smarter than the federal justice system. "Kathy," Emily said with the patience of someone who had spent 18 months building an absolutely airtight case, "you've been live streaming your federal crimes to hundreds of thousands of people for over a year. You have systematically documented your own criminal enterprise in unprecedented detail, provided federal prosecutors with more evidence than they usually collect in decade-long investigations. What exactly do you think you have left to bargain with when you've already given us everything? We need to convict you and your entire network." Federal agents simultaneously raid 23 locations across 12 states. News helicopters circle overhead as Derek provides evidence that connects Kathy to a massive elder abuse network. Anna calls Derek, sobbing with relief. "It's over, honey. It's finally over." But as federal agents examine Emily's files, one agent looks up with concern. "Ma'am, according to these documents, we're still missing someone important." Emily's face darkens. "What do you mean missing? Who else is out there?" The federal asset recovery operation that followed was like watching justice itself unfold in the most satisfying slow-motion replay you've ever seen, folks. Within 48 hours, Soft Kathy's live-stream confession to 300,000 witnesses. Federal marshals were executing seizure warrants across 12 states on properties that had been purchased with stolen elder abuse money. Kathy's rhinestone mansion, and trust me, was every bit as gaudy as you'd expect from someone who bedazzled her phone case, was being emptied by federal agents, while news crews documented every sparkly detail for the evening broadcasts. Her hot pink President's UV was being towed away on live television while federal investigators catalogued the evidence inside. And let me tell you, watching that ridiculous vehicle disappear behind a federal tow truck was poetry in motion. But here's most beautiful part of the whole asset recovery process. Every single dollar that Kathy had stolen from elderly victims was being returned through the federal restitution program. 47 families across 12 states were getting their homes back, their savings restored, and their dignity returned after months of systematic abuse. Mrs. Rodriguez, 83 years old and living on Social Security, cried when federal agents handed her the deed to her house and a check for the $3,000 Kathy had extorted from her. "I thought I was going to lose everything," she told their news cameras. "I hadn't slept through the night in 6 months because of what that woman did to me. Now I can finally rest in peace." Kathy's social media empire didn't just collapse, it was absolutely annihilating the most public way imaginable. Her follower count dropped from hundreds of thousands to just a few hundred diehard supporters. And even those remaining followers were mostly federal investigators and true crime enthusiasts. Her downfall for posterity. The woman who built her entire identity around online influence was reduced to posting from a federal holding cell wearing standard-issue prison clothing instead of her beloved rhinestones. Her final posts before all her accounts were permanently suspended were desperate attempts to claim federal conspiracy. But by then, everyone had seen the evidence, and absolutely nobody was buying her victim act. Derek Morrison's transformed her from reluctant criminal accomplice to genuine community hero was honestly one of the most heartwarming things I've witnessed in my entire career. His federal cooperation agreement included extensive community requirements, and Anna had convinced him to volunteer with the senior nutrition program at the local community center. Watching this man who'd stress-eaten McDonald's through months of criminal activity, no carefully preparing healthy meals for the same elderly residents he'd helped terrorize, was like witnessing a complete spiritual transformation. "I spent 18 months helping hurt people," Derek told me one afternoon while delivering meals to homebound seniors. "It feels incredible to finally be helping heal people instead of destroying them." Anna Morrison's election as our legitimate community president was such a landslide victory that it surprised absolutely nobody who'd watched her organize victim support during the federal investigation. Her campaign platform was beautifully simple: transparent democratic governance, constitutional rights for all residents, an absolute zero tolerance for anyone who targets vulnerable populations. The community thought had been terrorized by Kathy's fake HOA was finally experiencing genuine democratic participation, and Anna was leading with the kind of compassionate competence that made everyone feel safe and heard again. "We're not just a building. Our community," she announced during her inauguration speech. "We're creating something stronger and better than anything we had before this nightmare began." Emily's 18-month sacrifice in federal witness protection was finally receiving the recognition it truly deserved from the Department of Justice. They presented her with an Excellence Award for investigative analysis, and her innovative methods were being taught at federames across the country as the new standard for long-term undercover operations. But beyond all the professional accolades, Emily was finally able to properly grieve the 2 years we'd lost together, while celebrating the justice we'd achieved for dozens of elderly victims. "Missing our children's college graduations and your retirement celebration was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life," she told the victims' families during a community healing event. "But seeing all of you get your homes back and your dignity restored made every single day of sacrifice completely worthwhile." The community healing process was ongoing, but the progress was absolutely admirable to witness every single day. Mrs. Cooper's memorial senator was providing comprehensive services to elderly victims of financial crimes throughout the entire region, funded entirely by Kathy's seized criminal assets. The fake HOA bylaws that had terrorized residents were completely replaced with legitimate community governance documents that protected everyone's constitutional rights while maintaining reasonable neighborhood standards. Federal Victim Services helped dozens of families recover both financially and emotionally from months of systematic psychological abuse. Most importantly, the legal precedent set by this case was being used by federal prosecutors across the country to protect vulnerable, elderly populations from similar predatory schemes. The federal family recognition ceremony was held at FBI headquarters in Washington, and all 3 of our children received official commendations for their coordinated investigative work on what was being called the most successful elder abuse prosecution in federal history. Sophia's financial crimes expertise had traced the money laundering network through multiple jurisdictions and dozens of fake business entities. Ethan's homeland security coordination had prevented Kathy's accomplices from fleeing to other states or destroying crucial evidence. Lucas's postal inspection work had built mail fraud cases that ensured maximum federal penalties for the entire criminal conspiracy. Watching my children work together professionally while supporting each other personally was probably the single proudest moment of my entire life. Kathy's federal sentencing hearing was attended by over 100 elderly victims who'd traveled from across 12 states to witness justice being served in person. The victim impact statements continued for over 3 hours, with family after family describing the terror, humiliation, and financial devastation caused by Kathy's systematic targeting of vulnerable seniors. She called my elderly father worthless, told him he was a burden on the community, threatened to have his house condemned if he didn't pay her completely fake fees. Testified one daughter whose father had given Kathy his grocery money. She didn't just steal his savings, she stole his sense of safety and dignity in his own home. The federal judge's sentencing statement weighs everything those victims needed to hear, and so much more. Ms. Morrison, your crimes represent a calculated and systematic targeting of the most vulnerable members of our society. You exploited grief, isolation, and trust, total from people who had worked their entire lives for a little financial security in their retirement years. Your live streaming of these crimes demonstrates a level of narcissism and cruelty that demands the maximum penalty allowed by federal law. 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, complete forfeit of all criminal assets, and lifetime supervised release if she ever gets out. The courtroom erupted in sustained applause, and several elderly victims were openly weeping. With pure relief, Derek's separate sentencing hearing resulted in a much lighter penalty, thanks to his extensive cooperation and genuine rehabilitation efforts. 2 years in minimum security federal prison with credit for time served, plus thousands of hours of community service helping the elderly victims he'd participated in terrorizing. Anna's advocacy for her husband's complete transformation was met by the judge, who commended Derek's journey from reluctant criminal to dedicated community volunteer, Mr. Morrison. Your cooperation with federal investigators and your commitment to making genuine amends to the victims Joe helped harm demonstrate real remorse and rehabilitation. The judge stated, "Your sentence reflects both the seriousness of your participation in these crimes and your sincere efforts to repair the damage you caused." Federal marshals load millions in seized assets onto trucks while news crews Anna Morrison addresses the community. "We're finally safe." Derek nods, no longer stress-eating, finally at peace. But then Emily receives an urgent call. She listens, her face growing pale. Liam notices, "What's wrong?" Emily hangs up and turns to her family. That was the federal prosecutor. "Kathy wants to make a deal." The family exchanges glances, but what could possibly have left a bargain with? The federal courthouse was packed. beyond capacity for Kathy Morrison's since over 400 elderly victims, their families, federal agents, news media, and community supporters filling every available seat to witness justice for the largest elder abuse conspiracy in American history. Kathy sat at the defendant's table wearing standard federal prison clothing, no rhinestone jewelry, no designer accessories, no social media cameras to document her humiliation for internet followers who'd abandoned her the moment federal agents revealed her criminal activities. Federal prosecutors presented evidence of systematic elder abuse spanning 12 states, targeting over 400 vulnerable Americans, stealing $42 million, street identity theft, and property fraud schemes designed to destroy retirement security for families who'd served their country faithfully for decades. Victim impact statements lasted over 6 hours, with elderly Americans testifying about losing life savings, having their identities stolen, and watching their retirement dreams destroyed by criminals who specifically targeted them for appearing vulnerable and isolated. Mrs. Rodriguez wept as she described discovering her Social Security number being used by criminal organizations in 7 different countries. Mr. Thompson's voice shook with rage as he explained how medical identity theft had compromised his cancer treatment when fraudulent insurance claims blocked his access to legitimate health care. The elderly couple from the corner house held hands while describing how property deed fraud had nearly cost them the home they'd lived in for 37 years. Derek provided final testimony about systematic criminal coordination, financial record documentation, and victim targeting methodologies that federal prosecutors would use as evidence in elder abuse cases for generations. Federal sentencing guidelines recommended life in prison without possibility of parole under racketeering statutes, plus complete asset forfeit and restitution payments that would leave Kathy financially destroyed, even if she somehow survived federal incarceration. Judge Patricia Williams, herself, a 72-year-old former federal prosecutor who understood exactly what elder abuse meant to vulnerable communities, listened to every victim's testimony with growing anger at the systematic nature of Kathy's criminal enterprise. Morrison, Judge Williams, announced with federal authority that silenced Thepoked courtroom, "Your network represents the most sophisticated elder abuse conspiracy this court has ever encountered. You didn't just steal money. You stole peace of mind, retirement, security, and faith in community safety from hundreds of families who deserve to enjoy their golden years without fear of criminal exploitation." Kathy's final statement was a pathetic attempt to frame systematic criminal behavior as revenge against one federal agent. "I spent 3 years in federal prison because of Agent Harper," she whined. "I just wanted him to understand what it felt like to lose everything." Judge Williams cut her off with fury. "Ms. Morrison, you targeted hundreds of innocent elderly Americans to satisfy a personal vendetta. Your revenge fantasy became a criminal enterprise that destroyed retirement security across 12 states. This court finds your explanation not just inadequate, but morally reprehensible." Sentencing was swift: life in prison without parole, complete asset forfeit of $42 million for restitution, and mandatory participation in prison education programs teaching the human cost of white-collar crime. Federal marshals shackled Kathy as cameras recorded her final public appearance. The woman who built authority through social media manipulation and humiliation tactics would spend her remaining years as a federal inmate, her name forever tied to elder abuse and criminal arrogance. The community response was immediate. Anna Morrison organized victory gatherings for families who had survived systematic regime, Federal Victim Services provided long-term support for elderly residents recovering from fraud. Derek volunteered at senior centers, teaching seniors how to recognize and report scams. His transformation into an elder protection advocate, becoming a federal rehabilitation model. Emily coordinated with agencies to open the Mrs. Cooper Memorial Elder Protection Center, funded by seized assets, offering comprehensive services for vulnerable Americans facing sophisticated exploitation. Federal legislation inspired by Emily's Investigation Revolution, NANAN, Elder Abuse Prosecution nationwide. The Emily Harper Elder Protection Act created task forces to investigate, complete life theft operations, funded witness protection for elderly Americans, and supported community prevention programs that made systematic elder abuse nearly impossible where federal resources were in place. Congressional testimony by Emily and victim families drew bipartisan support, and prosecutors called it the most comprehensive elder protection law in U.S. history. My wife's sacrifice during 2 years of witness protection became federal policy shielding millions of elderly Americans from criminal aging. Derek's rehabilitation showed how federal cooperation could transform accomplices into advocates. His testimony revealed how the networks operated. His records helped recover millions in stolen assets. And his community service educated seniors about spotting fraud. Anna Morrison turned her family tragedy into healing. Her victim coordination work became a model for federal programs that empower neighbors to protect the vulnerable. Watch federal justice unfold was something I'd never experienced in 30 years of law enforcement. MLS investigation tied local crimes to international networks, documented systematic elder abuse across states, and set precedent for prosecuting complete life theft under racketeering statutes. Every call Kathy made, every dollar stolen, was documented by federal surveillance that turned her revenged fantasy into evidence for her life sentence. Emily and I rebuilt our lakeside retirement within inside security, knowing her work had dismantled the network threatening us and created protections that would shield elderly Americans for generations. Our mornings included news of restitution for victims' prevention programs and policy inspired by her sacrifice. The cabin Kathy destroyed was rebuilt with seized assets standing as a symbol of federal justice. Federal prison programs would provide Kathy with instruction in law, elder abuse psychology, and victim impact assessment during her life sentence and without parole. The dictator who live-streamed crimes 2000s would spend her remaining years studying the very system she tried to exploit. The federal corpus overflowed during Kathy Morrison's sentencing. Over 400 victims from 12 states testified about abuse. Judge Williams imposed life without parole, plus complete asset forfeit. Federal marshals removed Kathy in shackles as cameras documented her last public appearance. The Emily Harper Act became law. Derek's cooperation turned him into an advocate, and communities celebrated survival and lasting protections for elderly Americans. Federal justice is thorough, patient, and permanent. Elder abusers, beware. That helpless elderly resident might a federal family ready to respond. Professionally, research your targets carefully because federal familiars protect their own. Too bad Kathy Morrison learned this through a 25-year federal education program instead of respecting constitutional boundaries from the beginning. That's the story from Echo Stories. If this wild ride of justice served you the satisfaction you needed, smash that like button. I'm your storyteller, and I'll see you in the next incredible story. Asterisk, thanks for listening.